Hey, Bobby, how's it going, bud?
It's going pretty good, dude. How are you?
I am grand in Oklahoma. It's so happening here. How's Phoenix, Arizona?
It's nice and warm.
Yeah, what Oklahoma's warm right now, but I mean, it is seasonally warm, but it still sucks because it's like 60 during the day and then 30 at night. But but sometimes it's 1 degrees at night. It just varies.
Yeah.
The other day I think it was like in the 70s and stuff. Which
really?
Yeah, which Arizona I think has some of the most perfect weather because if you get too hot where you're at, just go north about 30 miles.
Right. Yeah.
And you're going to cool off.
Yeah, that's a nice thing.
But anyway, so what's been going on lately? I mean, just let everybody know that you're a graphic design artist and you do all my stuff, but you've also worked for, I'll let you say it.
Sorry, what was that? You kind of
who'd you work for? Like stuff like that.
So yeah, I started kind of I got into the t-shirt business, working for Grunt Style. Was there one of their graphic designers and illustrators for several years. Then I kind of shifted and went over to work with We the People Holsters, and was their main designer and creating their t-shirts and everything for them. And then went to another company that didn't work out, that, just things didn't align. Yeah. And then I've shifted now to the point where I'm kind of focusing on the freelance side and not having a apparel company over my head, and I can create my own t-shirts and work with whoever I want. So
are you saying that my company's not big enough to be over your head?
Well, not big enough to tell me what to do.
That's actually pretty fair. Yeah, I think it's the other way around. You're like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Actually, I don't think you've ever told me no or anything. You do things pretty quickly. I mean,
I try.
I don't even describe very well. I'm horrible with the word thing. So like this shirt you designed and stuff. I mean, you even corrected it for me because I was like, Jesus was a badass was the original slogan. And you're like, dude, it's not the way Christians think. It's Jesus is a badass. I'm like,
right.
Oh yeah. Which helps. I mean, in my experience before you, I don't know if you knew it, but I'd actually gone through like 3 or 4 designers trying to find somebody. And I've discovered that if you're a graphic designer, you're not always an artist. And if you're an artist, you're not always a graphic designer.
That's fair.
And so it was, I mean, some of the designs, I mean, they were great. Like the artist did some beautiful work, but I'm like, I don't need a Picasso painting of Jesus, or not Picasso, but, somebody famous.
Right.
Because Picasso, isn't he the one that does the abstract?
Yeah.
Yeah, not Picasso.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And it's kind of with all these different apps and new things coming out that make it easier to do graphic design and slap pictures on pictures and AI systems doing it for you and all that stuff. Like, amateur, quote unquote, graphic designers are all around. So,
yeah,
I'm used to it.
She was actually going to download an app to where on the her iPad that she can draw herself, and the app will fix it and make it look professional. She said,
right.
And I'm like, what? I was like, don't tell Bobby that. I'm like, he'll, but yeah, I mean, she can do it for her stuff because she does her own thing and stuff. She has kind of a sideline business, but not me. Mine needs a little more, somebody smarter than me. I mean, the fact that you're a thinker and you actually consider what you're doing and who's going to be looking at it, it really helped.
Well, that's kind of where kind of the cream rises to the top, I guess you could say. Anyone can call themselves a graphic designer. Like I said, so many people with all the apps, and even since Etsy came around and they have those little CNC plotters, and people can make their own decals and stickers and t-shirt, decals that they can iron on. Like, everyone can essentially call themselves a graphic designer, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to, the skills and the ability to interpret things and create those things with your own ideas, that's going to separate the herd.
Yeah, it's really not easy. I mean, I can't do it. It's just even if I have the idea, which I'm not in. When it comes to art, I'm more of a big picture type of guy. I can see, or like a big idea. But other than that, I mean, I just can't. I just can't do it. It's amazing that I even had ideas to create the shirts that I have.
You still get there though. Like you described what you were looking for. You were articulate enough to be able to say, hey, I'm looking for this. It's a cross between this and this, here's where I'm, big picture trying to go with it. And then, you go in that same line and just keep following that path. And,
yeah, that's what I was telling a buddy of mine. He's like, what? First he was wondering how I met you, which was weird. I mean, because I recognized the shirt on Fiverr, and you were just doing some freelance stuff, and so that's how I got a hold of you and stuff. But they're like, how does he understand what you want? Because people speak to me, they know that I'm not very good at describing art stuff or anything like that. And I'm like, well, he speaks Asperger's really well, or at least understands it.
Sure.
So which helps, my boss, when I was a car salesman, he did too. He was a psychologist, or he went to school for psychology and stuff, which helped because, when you speak like me and understand like me, sometimes it's difficult because you can be saying something with total common sense that everybody should understand. And I recognize I'm like this, and I won't understand a word you're saying until you say it, just tweak it a little bit. And then suddenly it hits me, and then I feel dumb because I didn't understand it this whole time.
Sure.
So, I learned though, sort of slowly.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about having that conversation and asking questions and context is king. So if you can get the context surrounding whatever they're talking about, eventually you're going to understand what they're talking about. And, the more information you have, especially for, a designer or an illustrator like myself, the more information you have, the better at it you're going to get to what they're envisioning in their head. So that was the case with you, and just having conversation and talking with you kind of solidified that.
Yeah. Which is strange because we live in a world right now that context is not important and communication is not important. It's do you agree with the loudest voices? Not the majority, just the loudest voices. That's what I've found. And luckily, I don't care if you agree with me or not. I mean, I'm going to say what I say. I'm going to think what I think because I really firmly believe in that. And you'd think artists would all think that way. But I've found some that they wouldn't touch my stuff simply because they just didn't agree. I'm like, you don't even know what it's about. They're like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm like, what? What was it? Because you, being in you're in the public square, even though you're not in the public eye. I mean, did it affect your drawings or anything? Did you have to say, well, I can't do this because, I don't want people to get offended or anything?
I mean, when we were at Grunt Style, I did a couple shirts that were, let's say they were well beyond the realm of, pissing people off. Yeah. And so there was some shirts that we put out that I designed that, push buttons, and people could have found them. I'm sure they did found them offensive and been like, I don't like that shirt. It's offensive, or, has bad language on it, what have you. But then there was a few more that I did that were, as they said at the company, extra spicy. And they would absolutely be pushing buttons and without question pissing people off. And those, they had to question, like, do we put this out and have just let it erupt, or, do we maybe hold on to this one or can it for a while or whatever, because we know, this is being put out essentially to offend, and with that directive. So It's funny, yes, for most people, but it's still very offensive. So it's kind of like they wanted to toe that line of, being, almost to the point where it's, that's too far. And then they say, take it a couple steps back so it can reach the wider audience.
I honestly, my perspective about that is I think it's important to be offended. I mean, because when you're offended, it's kind of like stretching that the boundaries of what you can handle and what you see and what you're able to learn. Because sure. It's like I said this the other day, and man, it offended people because I said, and I even put disclaimers when I say things. It's like I'm not saying he's right or what he's saying is true, but I do believe that we need people like Alex Jones. Not because I agree with him, but because he makes you question the narrative, and which is very important.
Yeah, definitely kind of just speaking on perspective and getting someone, even if it's not, up front, totally questioning the narrative, it gives you another perspective or another outlet to look at things and go, oh, maybe I looked at it wrong, or, that sounds kind of valid, and, sometimes it's that also that loudest guy in the room kind of thing where you almost write them off initially. But, I think guys like Alex Jones, yeah, they're obnoxious and they can be, total pricks sometimes, but at the same time, it's, what they're saying, comes from somewhere. So it's not just half the time they're pulling it out of their ass.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they found that a lot of things he would say was actually accurate. It was just the fact that he said it, which to me, I kind of, even if I don't agree with somebody, as long as they're not being like on the woke side of things, just being that guy, but when they have the balls to stand up and say, no, that's wrong, when everybody else is saying, oh, just agreeing. Because most of the time it's not that everybody agrees with a lot of things that are going on. It's that they're apathetic. We're living in an age of apathy that they don't want to offend anybody. And I've found that Christian culture is really bad about that, where they don't want to offend and stuff. And I feel like I need to turn my phone off because they're blowing me up. But
hey, you're popular.
Yeah, with one person at least. But they don't want to offend, and so they allow things to happen. And because they're allowed, this other side is allowed to have that megaphone. It could just be one person that said this, and somebody's going to say it. I mean, look at the news. The news will actually read an article from another news source, and then they will quote that source and say it's sourced information because they quoted it. And then now you have two or three, which honestly, a lot of the news agencies are owned by the same people. They say the same stuff. And because they
verbatim
assume, verbatim. And that's been proven. I mean, you just get on YouTube or anything, Rumble, and you can find tons of videos where these newscasters are all saying the same exact thing verbatim. Right. And, that's the society we're in. And because they do that, people think that's the truth when it's not. It's like people aren't even questioning it, and they just agree just because we're in a headline society. We people read the headline. The headline may say that Donald Trump is being sued by such and such, possible jail time, and people read that and they don't read the article. But the article will say, yeah, this person sued, but this person was actually cracked out on crack cocaine and doesn't even know Donald Trump. Donald Trump's never even met them, and so it's not plausible at all. But nobody reads that part.
Yeah. I think just like everything else that you find out about history and social climate, social culture, what have you, they always use the metaphor of it being a pendulum, and things move in that fashion where eventually it's going to swing the other way. And I think it's starting to get to that point where you have a lot of these, leftist or woke culture, the cancel culture kind of people that are making people really consider what they're saying and be, walking on eggshells, trying not to offend people, and kind of seeing as more information or these woke people try to, talk and say why they're offended, more of that context comes out. And then the majority of people who can think for themselves and formulate, that opinion from seeing a couple different, pieces of information, they'll go, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And they'll be like, I don't know about that. And eventually it's going to swing the other way where, that voice that's been screaming, I'm offended and I don't like this, I don't like that, we're going to cancel you, is eventually going to be like, well, no one's listening to you anymore because, the majority realize that you're just, a whiny baby.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've noticed that I've seen a lot of people that have posted videos about walking away from the left and actually becoming conservative.
Right.
Because conservatives are more, they hold more of the same values that people don't listen to. And they go woke, and then they listen to it. They're like, oh, well, that's what that means, and this is what they're actually saying over here. So they leave the left and become conservative. But I haven't seen a video yet, and I'm sure they're out there. I'm just going to say that for the sake of humanity, that the probability there are videos out there, but you don't see them where people are leaving the left or the right and becoming woke.
Right.
The only time I hear about that is like a buddy of mine's brother is a pastor who his son came out as gay, and so all of a sudden he becomes a leftist, even though he was always conservative. But that's because you get emotions involved, and you do that, and that's typically what I've seen. People become woke because of the emotion instead of reality, because emotion, that it's powerful. That's why every single domestic situation I've ever been was caused by emotions. Every single crime I've ever, I say been in, of course, as a police officer, I haven't physically been into a domestic situation.
Right.
But in every crime I've solved was based on emotion. It's like, we'll go, burglary. Well, they're like, that's not emotional. Yeah, it is. They don't have money. They're scared they don't have money, and they need to go buy drugs, or they need to, hawk some stuff. And so instead of thinking logically, do this, they can think emotionally, I need to get money quickly.
Right.
And so
I think
that.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of, we run into a lot of the issues, if you want to put it in a political spectrum or going, conservative, left wing, what have you. I think there's two things where, most people would generally, if you were to talk to them, fall kind of in the middle of the road. There's elements of both sides that people are going to agree with and kind of disagree on. And, they're eventually, or most people are going to be kind of that middle of the road, both sides they agree with on certain aspects. But I think that's kind of, again, going to the extremes and kind of using blanket statements, I think is the crux of the whole thing. And you just slap, you get a little bit of the information and all of a sudden it's a blanket statement on, that person as a whole, when that's only one minutia fragment of their personality or, how they feel. Case in point, not to like put you on blast or correct you or anything, but saying, the pastor whose son came out as gay, like he could still be a conservative. He just now is an ally to that cause.
Yeah.
But most people would just be like, well, you support that, so you're automatically that, so it's kind of one of those cruxes, and could, that's, I think, is the most damaging, where you just take blanket statements and don't consider the whole picture.
Yeah. And it is, we're naturally emotional. So to be,
right.
Even me, who people assume I don't have emotions. I have emotions. There are things that I will just automatically jump to, and I have to stop and fight against my emotion and think about something a little more clearly and say, and I've done that, and I've gotten where I didn't like somebody because of this or this. And then I stopped and thought about it. I'm like, well, how many times are you in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you automatically start cussing at them or something? You flip off or something, or at least you want to do that. Well, I mean, how do you know that person's not, on their way to the hospital and their daughter is dying or something and they have to get there quickly? That would change everything. I mean, how quick would you go? Would you obey the laws? Would you be polite in the road? But people don't think like that. We just want to assume this or that, and it's just not always the case. I know people that won't donate to they won't give money to homeless people or anything because they're like, well, that person's just going to give it all on alcohol, and this person may not even be an alcoholic, or even if this person does. That's why I say I give money not because of who they are, it's because of who I am.
Right.
I believe in giving. That's what you do. But a lot of people, they really do. They just do blanket statements. They assume bad and everything. And I was like, I know some really good Democrats that are really – I know some Democrats that are really good people.
Right.
They mean well, and they think they're doing good. They assume. It's like BLM. I know some people a lot of your normal people that are BLM supporters are supporting it because of what they believe BLM stands for.
Right.
They don't follow the money. They don't look at the politics of it. They don't look how these people that are running it ended up super wealthy,
right.
That George Soros is funding it and the money is going back into the pockets of the Democrats. It's just, they don't look at that. They just look at, hey, that Antifa, well, it means anti-fascist. So it's got to mean, like, okay, yeah, you fight fascism with fascism. I see. I mean, it's just, but people don't like to put a lot of deep thought into it. That's why, honestly, a lot of people won't have conversations with people like me because I talk deeply. I want to get to the bottom of something. And they just want to just know what the score of the football game was, And I'm like, I don't care about football. I'm like,
right.
But, it's, life and it sucks. And we have to fight it down. It takes people wanting to become better, but to want to become better, you got to acknowledge that you're not right all the time. I told somebody, a politician up in Idaho a few months ago that, I never follow evidence to be right or to be wrong, to prove anybody wrong or to prove myself right. That's not why I follow evidence and go where it goes. That's how I find the truth. If you just follow the evidence without having any kind of bias, and then, and he said something which I've always followed, but I never put it into words. He said, always be willing to be wrong. If you're always willing to be wrong, you're able to have humility, one, and you're able to find truth. And so many people, I'm sure we all know people that completely believe something and they ended up not being true, but they still stuck with the gun. I mean, look how many people still wear masks.
Right.
And the scientists come out to say that, finally people have done their own studies instead of listening to Fauci, who keeps on jumping back and forth. They come out and they did studies that are like, yeah, it actually will get you sicker because it holds all the they found tuberculosis inside these masks that were only worn for 8 hours. I mean, you know what they didn't find? COVID. They haven't found a single mask that had COVID on it. But people don't listen to that because they want to be. They don't want to humble themselves and say, "Well, I was wrong. I fell into it." I know a lot of conservatives that at the beginning of everything, even at the beginning of January 6th, they automatically jump into the ballpark and say, "Hey, this was wrong." Blah blah blah. This, but they don't even have any of the facts. I mean, we can go on and on. Ukraine. At the beginning of Ukraine, I questioned it because I question everything. And I also remember that Biden worked, with Ukraine. And there was that whole fiasco. His son was on their board, all this other stuff. Ukraine happens to be the sex trafficking capital of the world. That I knew all these things were happening. And Putin's been talking about, Ukraine doing something wrong for years, trying to get NATO involved. Everybody forgot that. They just know, Russia's being horrible to Ukraine. And they jump on board with this. And then, several $1 trillion later, now people are saying, oh, yeah, why are we even going with Ukraine? Because this and this is happening. This is corrupt. Look at their leader. He's actually this legitimate actor that, is this guy and does, and it's just a money laundering scheme. But because they just jump into emotions, everybody's guilty of it. We all think emotionally when we shouldn't be thinking emotionally. But anyway, sorry, you go ahead. I'm talking.
No, case in point, these things you're emotional about, and you can, that's where you have conversations. It's, again, having the humility to kind of stop yourself, take a step back, say, maybe I don't have the whole picture. Maybe I got one aspect wrong. Like, most of my feelings on this probably could be right, but I could be slightly wrong and probably think about this differently. And that's usually how I like to think that way and get more information on certain topics and events before making rash judgments.
Yeah. I remember at the beginning of our friendship, me, of course, I always talk about things that are not have nothing to do with the person I'm talking to or anything. It's just the thought that's on my mind. That's just the way my mind works. I'll talk to a complete stranger. I'm like, hey, do you know what's going on in Ukraine? They're like, who the hell are you? But, but that's just me. But you wouldn't give. I didn't know your personal belief system about anything for a long time, about your opinion about anything. I'm like, I don't know if he's a leftist, because most artists I've met are kind of leftists. I don't know this. Is he working there just because it's a job and he disagrees with them? I didn't know, but you were smart enough not to tell me, to be honest. You thought about things first. It's kind of like, me being a cop, people assume when they see cop stuff, like on like a shooting, they'll ask me, assuming that I'm going to have an opinion because I was a cop. And I'm like, it's because I was a cop, I don't have an opinion. I know nobody knows what happened. And then when you see the after effects and you understand what's going on, it's like, we'll take George Floyd. The officer was convicted of first-degree murder, right?
Right.
That doesn't even fall under the context of the law. First-degree murder means that it was murder with intent, that you did this intending on killing the person, that you had it was premeditated. Well, nothing about that case was premeditated. That was obvious. Was it possibly, what could have possibly been manslaughter or something? Yeah.
Sure.
There's a lot of possibilities for things, but the one thing it wasn't was this. And yet that's what they go for. And they get a conviction. And the conviction isn't because that's what they felt was right or wrong. He was going to get guilty no matter what.
Right. Yeah.
Even though the autopsy came out and they found out 2 autopsies says he died of a drug overdose, and yet they still convict the guy, and he's still in prison. It's not about truth. It's about their emotions and appeasing society. And because the certain groups will speak louder than others, people will assume that's what the majority feel and the majority think, and so they make decisions based on that. So things get worse, even though that's not the way the world works. It's if you want to control somebody, control their information, basically. You can control their emotions. You can control everything if you can control the information that gets inside their head. And it's very true. People should be smart enough to know this. How many people do you know that believe that we live in a democracy? And they will call it a democracy constantly. I know adults that have no idea that we are not a democracy, and thank God for it. Could you imagine if the majority ruled? That would mean that the laws would change depending on the emotion. Right. The emotion of the majority. Well, 51% of the people in the world or in the United States believe this, so therefore we're going to say this. We're going to make this right. No, we're in a constitutional republic. That's a fact. That's not even an opinion. That's the right thing. It's a fact. Come on. The Pledge of Allegiance says, for the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, that's what it says, and God, over 90% of everybody in the world believes in God. They just believe in God in a different way.
Right.
So that's not even, I wouldn't say religious as in like it's, but people, if you're in a majority of Christian area, people will assume when you say God, you're talking about Christian.
Right.
Look, my company, Soldier of God Apparel, people assume it's a Christian company, and I'm not saying it's not or it is or anything like that. I'm just saying what people perceive.
Right.
And you can control that. And then people will allow it to control them because of what people assume.
Right. But that's kind of the beauty of the route you've taken it, kind of trying to, as you described it to me when we first spoke, was kind of be, the grunt style of that vein of, apparel. And, that's essentially what, grunt style does. They poke that bear, and, for your case, and you've had countless experiences that you've told me of, it gets the conversation started. And that's what we need. That's what we need to have happen, for society to kind of regroup and heal as a whole, is to have those conversations and to have these kind of deep conversations where, you're not letting your emotions get the best of you and you're allowing, different points of view to come across.
Yeah. I think one of the number one phrases that is rarely spoken is, I didn't think about that.
Right.
It should be a very common phrase because you heard a different opinion that kind of makes you think, and that's why I don't want everybody. I like to speak to people that I don't agree with, but it's hard to speak with people I don't agree with because they don't want to hear what you have to say. And then instead of talking to you in a way that they're just trying to get you to understand the way they feel, they're trying to tell you they're right. And they tell it to you like they're right. And you can respect somebody else's beliefs and still say exactly what you feel by not necessarily, like my religious beliefs or my spiritual beliefs will say that. It may align closer to Christianity than others, but I'm not going to try to persuade you to become a Christian or persuade you to believe the way I do. But that doesn't mean I won't talk to somebody about the way I believe, but I found it's hard because I found the religious are just as bad as the woke when it comes to their belief system. They believe in freedom of religion as long as you're a Christian. They believe in freedom of speech as long as you state it the way Christians would state it.
Right.
And I'm like, you can't be that way. I mean, it's like I had this discussion with he was a very woke liberal who he was a Bernie Sanders liberal, but he was very woke. And he stated, we were talking about, Antifa and Nazis and stuff. And he said, I think it's perfectly acceptable to punch a Nazi because they're so wrong. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He said, because they are, intrinsically wrong and hateful and they're spreading hate and stuff. And you shouldn't be allowed to say that. I'm like, no. I'm like, allowing somebody to say something doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you may find it repulsive, but I think they have the right to speak, because one, it'll prove that they're hateful. Imagine if you had a social media thing and page and you weren't allowed to say any hate speech, quote unquote, whatever that is. And so nobody knows exactly the way you believe and feel. And so somebody starts talking to you and becomes friends with you through this, and they don't realize that you're, let's say you are a Nazi and you happen to be Jewish and you become friends because you have no idea they're a Nazi because they're not allowed to say anything. And then you end up hanging out with them and they're a murderous Nazi and they find out you're a Jew. That's kind of a bad situation to be in. But because we want to censor everything and protect people's feelings and their ears, it's just, I I was thinking this the other day. I was like, everybody talks about free speech, the freedom to speak and wanting to elevate other people's voices. But we also need the freedom of hearing, to hear other people's voices.
Right.
It's very important. And I think, like you said, the pendulum, I think we will end up swinging the other way, because it'll get to the point where it's ridiculous and people are feeling trapped. And unfortunately, we get that way. It's hard to ever be in a very comfortable spot, because when you're comfortable, then people start saying, oh, well, this is all bad, and we need socialism. And then we get socialism, then they're like, oh, this is bad, we need capitalism. Then we get back to that, and it's always going back and forth, because people get comfortable and then they get uncomfortable, because they realize that what they thought they wanted and needed is not exactly at all what is reality. But
yeah, that's 100% true.
So basically what you're saying was that in the art world, you didn't care.
Yeah. I've removed myself from, a lot of that emotion, and, especially for when I'm creating, artwork for whoever it is, doesn't matter. I try to do my research and try to, again, put myself in the perspective of the demographic client that company or brand is aiming towards, and try to find, those veins of interest and humor, or even offense that, will get a reaction, or get someone to, reach in their pocket and pull out a $20 bill and be like, I want that, give it to me. That's kind of the route I took with the Don't Be a Dick shirt for you.
Which I get a lot of fans about that. I get more fans with that one than even the Jesus is Badass. Jesus is Badass actually offends more people than Don't Be a Dick. It's weird.
Well, I told you it would, even despite your hesitation on that one, I told you it would be a widespread winner, because essentially that's, what you're hitting all marks on that one.
Yeah, you're right. I honestly, and the thing is people assume that I don't mind offending people and that I like offending people. And it's not. I actually hate offending people. I get nervous with confrontation. As many fights as physical fights I've been into, I still get nervous. It's still,
right.
It's still, a little shaky. And it's not necessarily about losing. It's not about anything like that. Not about getting hurt. I just the idea of conflicting, because I naturally want to make people happy.
Right.
And, but at the same time, I won't stop myself from offending somebody based on what I think needs to happen. I think we need the conversations. People need to know, because, a lot of people use the Bible as a weapon of mass division.
Right.
It's there to say, I'm better than you, even though I'm not going to use the words, I'm better than you. I'm saying I'm better than you. I'm going to heaven, you're not. So I'm going to try to make it where you get to go to heaven. I'm like, what? It's just, I'm like, I don't remember Jesus ever doing this.
Right.
I've read what he had said. Now a lot of people put a lot of stock into what people said about Jesus. I put the stock in what Jesus actually said and did himself, because their interpretation of what he said and did doesn't necessarily mean it was right. And I'm just not getting into theology saying it was wrong either. But what I'm saying is that, I take it from what I see the person do. Like if somebody said that you believed a certain way, I would take it from what you told me you believe in, the way you act. I have a friend that I did a interview with her, and Lee Dundas, she's an international human rights attorney. It's funny. She said she has literally saved people from human sex trafficking, saved children. And yet the woke culture hate her because she spoke up about, the COVID restrictions.
Sure.
I'm like, what? She saves lives. But then again, these same people, they will talk about, saving the environment, but they'll buy a Tesla, which, uses a huge amount of coal to produce the electricity. And then, every single rechargeable battery you have uses slave labor to get the
Right.
minerals. Literal, like 72% of all mines are using slave labor, and all the other mines that make up the other 28%, they're literally only, these small mines are only like 3% of the production each
Right.
mine. So, but they'll use that because it's not about what is, it's what it appears to be.
Right.
But anyways, they were talking about, I was talking to somebody, I posted something about an interview I was watching with her. I was there at the studio, and she was having this interview, and somebody said she's a Scientologist and starts posting all these videos that is basically hating on her. And so when I had her on, I was like, I gotta know. Not that I don't even care, honestly, but I don't like to assume anything about anybody. And when somebody's saying something that's false, I want to nip it in the bud. And I said, "Are you a Scientologist?" And she laughed. She said, "Oh, that was last year. Now apparently I'm a Mormon and a Jew." I was like, "What?" She said, "Yeah, people just keep." She said, "But to be honest, I've been raised Christian my whole life." She said, "I even go to church on Sundays." But that's what people assume,
right?
And it's just wrong. I mean, people just need to get over it and quit making them kind of assumptions and just, I forgot why I even led into that conversation. Anyway, but damn it. But yeah,
lost the train of thought.
Yeah, and if you've never noticed, I do that a lot. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, I have ADHD." I don't know what I have. I just know that if I get to talking, I will follow that rabbit trail and every other rabbit trail that goes there. Usually depend on my friends to keep me in track. But maybe that's why I don't talk to a lot of people. They're getting worn out.
Kind of interesting having a podcast then.
Yeah, I know, right?
Then you're talking to a lot of people.
I know. Well, now I'm sitting there it's like, yeah, now you have to listen to me. They're like, no, I don't. Click. But it's just, a lot of things are important and nobody knows they're important because all they can see is what is going on in here. And I'm constantly finding new things that I'm like, man, how long have you been doing this? They're like, I've been doing this for years. I'm like, never even heard of it. It's because nobody talks about it because they're too interested in this, But
right.
And I like to, my whole purpose of even my podcast is literally I say raising the vibration of the world. I want to raise people's vibration. And a lot of people don't understand it. And then you get a lot of super religious people like, oh, that's new age. I'm like, actually, it's older than Christianity. I'm like, praying was not invented by the Christians. And but if you look underneath, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, if you look underneath a microscope and look at your skin as far as you can go, like at your hand, you will find that to the smallest noticeable, particle, we're nothing but light and vibration. We're not solid.
Right.
And that's a scientific fact. That's not just hearsay. That's not just somebody having a theory, it's a fact. And so, raising the vibration means that, getting you more enlightened. And that's either through an experience that you had or just your ideas, your thoughts. You may not even agree, but disagreeing with somebody can also be enlightenment. It lets you understand that this person, there's people like that. This is what they think. And this is why. I used to, I have a buddy, and as you know, most Christians are very pro-life. And if you get a pro-life and a pro-choice talking to each other, it's typically war. They start yelling at each other and stuff like this. And pro-lifers usually think horrible things about pro-choice. And pro-choice think pro-life people are trying to take away women's rights and stuff. So I was talking to a good friend of mine who's very, very pro-life, and I was explaining to him about the reason why I do things and get an understanding. I'm like, let's take pro-choice. If you have a woman and she's married to a very highly abusive man, and she doesn't know how to escape at all, but he's very abusive, she ends up pregnant. She knows without a doubt that man is going to beat her while she's pregnant. Now, that child may end up surviving, but more than likely will be abused, like have mental retardation or something like that.
Sure.
And even if the child is healthy, the child is born. Now the child is living in this abusive relationship, and she doesn't know how to get away or get out. And so she's scared, and she doesn't want to do that to another human being. And so she decides, I need to stop the birth before it happens. And so she gets an abortion. Now, you don't have to agree with her, but doesn't it make you kind of understand her frame of thought, and kind of empathize with her situation? And that's what I'm trying to do. I want you to see from somebody else's perspective, if they'll speak logically instead of just yelling and saying you're such a horrible person. Well, quit focus on the other person and just say what you mean, why you think the way you think.
Right.
Nobody else matters, but then you can see what the other person feels and believes because you're listening to them. And you're like, and when you do that, you're able to understand. And when you have an understanding, that opens the doorway to loving somebody. And as a Christian, you are told to love everybody, including your enemies. And like the famous general in Japan, he wrote The Art of War. Anyway, he said to know thy enemy is to love thy enemy. And that's what it means. It means you know them so well, you understand them, and you love them because you know that why they're doing what they're doing. You may not agree,
right?
But you still understand them. And I think it's very important for people to try to understand the other side. You don't not try to agree with them, but people don't want that. Look at how many people are closing their ears. I've watched so many videos of these woke cultures protesting, and people are actually legitimately trying to talk to them, and they start squelching and screaming, like literally just making banshee noises so they don't have to hear them. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. It's
like, I've seen that happen.
I just watched on the January 6th trial. Whether you agree or believe it, I was there, but nobody cares. I mean, well, the people that should listen aren't listening or caring. So my opinion is not going to make any difference, even though I was there and I have the experience of a police officer tell you what's going on. But they actually, the January 6th committee sealed all of the videotapes for 50 years. Why would you do that? What I'm saying? That just seems very suspicious. I mean, that's, in my previous field, we called that a clue of what somebody actually believes and what they're actually doing. If you're hiding information. And so I think even if, I don't care, let's say that we believed that Trump was the one who actually was, let's say Trump won the election and we thought that he was cheating, right? And thought that there was possible election fraud and stuff like that with Trump. I would not disagree with looking into his voting machines or looking at anything because I want to know the truth. Even if I agree with him, even if I want him president, I want him president because of the right reasons. Because if he's cheating to get there, it doesn't matter whether it's good. It's like I watched this video about this cop. A buddy of mine sent me the video, and the guy is pulled over and he's videotaping the cop. The cop is at the back end of the car, and the back passenger door is open, and this guy's recording him, and the cop throws a bag into the car, and it says, "Hey, what is that? You catch him throwing drugs." And me as being law enforcement, I'm not going to defend that. That's horrible. Right. I wouldn't say, well, that he's a bad guy, so a bad guy needs to go to jail, and that's just the way he's going to do it. It doesn't matter. Do it for the right reasons. If he's a bad guy, he's going to get caught. He'll eventually happen. Let's do it for the real reasons. Because great, most people that get caught breaking the law, they've done whatever they got caught 1,000 times and never got caught. But that doesn't matter. That's not the way the world works. I wouldn't want to live in a world that you get punished for things that you could possibly have done. It's wrong. I don't believe in thought crimes. It's not like that guy. I told you earlier about a guy, casing my house. On my video says he's trying to, look at my security system and stuff, and then takes off. And people are like, "Well, why don't you call the police? I was like, listen, technically he didn't do anything wrong. It's suspicious, but I can't get him because he thought about breaking into my house or wants to break into my house. You are perfectly free to want to break into my house. I'm just saying that I have cameras for your protection. I have a lock for your protection because I will end a life if I believe that life is going to take one of my family members' lives or my neighbor's lives. I will take your life first.
Right.
Anyways, I'm dominating the conversation. So what do you think, Bobby?
I mean, I think you've touched on a lot of things, and it's, like I said, before, I'm kind of middle of the road a lot of places, and I try to keep a open perspective. And back to the t-shirt, the t-shirt stuff, and the one I did for you that I still believe in is just, even though I'm not I was raised Christian and kind of fell out of it and, don't really pay much attention. So I'd be like closer to agnostic now, but I grew up on it. I went to religious ed classes up until I was, 14, 15 years old. If you read the Bible and you study it, and everyone has their own interpretation, but when you whittle it down to its base principles, it's just repeatedly telling you not to be a dick. Love each other, love, everyone as you love yourself, and just be kind. And that's kind of how I try to operate.
Yeah, it should be a pretty simple idea. Just be kind to people.
Right. But I mean, like, here's kind of, I guess, now that I've said it out loud and it hit me just then, but that could be why so many people are kind of vile and attacking people now, verbally, physically, what have you. Again, that whole principle of loving someone as you love yourself, it just shows that there's so many people out there right now who don't love themselves, and their lives aren't perfect. They're not going the way they hoped or dreamed or want them to. They don't have the body that they wish they did or what have you, and part of it's, social media and TikTok, and, people compare themselves to these, Instagram models and, pretty people dancing on their phone, and that brings them down. And, like you said before, lowers their vibration, and, they're not able to love themselves. So how are they going to love someone else? And I've, few years ago, I've started following Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, I know Gary.
Business mogul, awesome guy.
I
love
Gary
watching his
personally. Let me
right, yeah,
I just know of him.
But I've been watching his stuff, and I mean, he always kind of went on the sentiment of lead with kindness. Yeah, doesn't matter how shitty someone is. Lead with kindness. You can tell them to, fuck off, and as much as you want, but try, you can tell them to tell them off. But then, if they're being vile to you or mean to you or, throwing hate at you, there's something about in the mirror that, they hate about themselves or their life. So the best thing you can do is just lead with that kindness, and hopefully, it'll reflect back on you. So I try to take that approach and try to keep that in mind. Every time I run into those situations, and try not to, get caught up in it. 'Cause again, that's what we're here to be and do, is love each other. So.
Yeah, I've got an analogy I use, and it's a lot of people do have problems with loving themselves. I mean, I can personally say it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you've been stepped on a lot, because you start looking at common sense says if every one of your friends ends up being dramatic, maybe you're the one that's dramatic. You know what I'm saying? But let's say you're at a Thanksgiving dinner and somebody asks you to pass the mashed potatoes. Sounds weird. Mashed taters. That sounds better. Let's say you have the mashed taters, and somebody wants you to pass it to them, and so you have to grab it, but you don't know how to grab it. How are you going to pass it to anybody if you don't know how to grab it yourself? And that's really the truth about it. And you're absolutely right. I think I firmly believe, and I've never heard a single Christian ever talk about the purpose of life or why we're here. I don't know why they don't. They're focused on one thing, and I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that you need to think about the reason we're here. And my reasoning, and it just makes sense, is we're here for two reasons. It's to love and to learn. If you're not learning or loving, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You know,
right?
And getting back to what Jesus said, and I don't think Jesus said anything that hasn't been said before. I think he just said it in a way where they could understand. Because if it's a natural truth, if it's a truth that God gave us, then it was something that could be said by 100,000 different people. But sometimes it takes that one person saying it the right way to the right people at the right time. And he said, he was talking to somebody, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If you haven't noticed, I repeat myself a lot. And it's not on purpose, even though it seems like it is. It's not. But somebody asked Jesus what the most important commandment was, and Jesus said, well, nobody's going to be able to complete all 10 commandments. We're not perfect. We're going to fail. However, the most important two commandments, or the superior commandments, is love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might, and just the like, meaning just as equally as loving God. Remember, God is literally part of us. So just as equally as loving God, love your neighbor as thyself. That means you have to love all three. That means you love yourself, you love your neighbor, and you love God all equally. And that's not even a Christian concept. Listen, and I'll use the Bible as an explain. The Bible says that we're made in God's image. Well, science says we're nothing but light and vibration. God. Part of, or if you're an agnostic Christian, Gnostic Christian, which means a Christian that looks for truth, facts, not just going off of emotions. And people say, well, that's not even possible. Actually, there were Gnostic Christians back in the day, during Christ's time. Anyways, not to get into theology or anything, but if we're part of God and God is in us, source, that's where I was going with it, was that, some people call it source, which, because to me, saying God isn't actually big enough, that kind of puts a human switch to it. Like they have human emotions and stuff. Source says the creator of everything. Everything got started because of this. I mean, people like to say the Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory didn't start things. Because remember, physics, Newtonian physics actually says all objects in motion will stay in motion until another object of equal or greater momentum, can stop it, and vice versa. It'll not move until something of equal or greater momentum moves it. That's science. And so therefore something had to have started this. So let's say source, we're all part of source. That means that if I'm loving you because you're part of source also, you're part of God, then I am worshiping God by loving you. By being good to you, I'm actually being good to God. And by being kind to myself, I'm being kind to God. And I'm being kind to you. So all three needs to matter. It's that important. Yeah,
and that's kind of a revelation I've come across, through different kinds of reading and, introspective kind of exploration that I've found over the past couple of years. That's where it all boils down to is, following that path, leaving leaving it better than you found it. You know, the energy that you put out is what you get back in. So, you know, the best you can do is just keep putting that loving energy out to everyone you can, regardless of what comes back to you, because eventually, you know, it will come back. Whatever you want to call it, you know, be karma or what have you. Like, that's just kind of how science and the universe works. So, you know, that's the way people should kind of hold themselves. Whatever they call it or whatever they label it as, is up to them.
Did you know karma actually means action? It's just the result of certain actions, and it causes you to have to make action, to take action.
Right.
But people look at it in a woo-woo kind of sense. Oh, like, oh, that's a yoga thing or yogi thing or Hindu thing, or, you know, that's a Buddhist thing. But actually, that's all it means. It's just that because of this thing, it caused this to happen, you know?
Right.
And even though, you know, the Bible, even in the Christian religion, it talks about it. It just uses different terminology to say the same thing. But so many people focus on the terms. They're like, well, that's right. Law of attraction isn't real. You know, I'm like, well, Jesus talked about it. God talked about it. You know, it's in the Bible. They just didn't use the word law of attraction. It's saying that, you know, if you do this, good things will come to you, shaking over, overflowing, or whatever. There's a whole verse that people say every time you go to tithe. You know, they'll say that at church. That's literally the definition of law of attraction. You know, it's saying this will cause this to happen. And I firmly believe in it, you know, and that's why I give, and I don't do it because, oh, this is old covenant or this is new covenant or this is what this means or this is how much we give or not. I don't care. You know, I give because this person's hungry. That's a pretty good reason to give. You know, I give because these people are in need. And when I'm in need, you know, I am hopeful that it will come back to me and people will remember that I did this or the universe, God, source, you know, angels, whatever you want to call it, you know, whatever your belief system is. I hope it's remembered and I don't end up stuck on an island, because if you're that person it's crappy to everybody, that's always cantankerous, and you're very selfish, good luck getting people to help you. You literally caused your own karma. You know, nobody's going to help you. And, you know, and I understand why. I would still help you. I mean, unless you're that type of person that you're just wanting something from me. I mean, I'm going to be smart. But if you're just a jackass, but you don't use people and you're not just trying to get money off somebody, I don't mind helping you, because it's not about me. I mean, it's not about, let me say, it's not about you, but it is about who I am. You know, I believe we are here to love and to learn. And loving people doesn't mean that you have to like them, doesn't mean you have to believe in them or agree with them, you know, but you can still love people. You know, I can. Right. I had this, I posted this thing that was talking about if you're a Muslim, I don't care. Love you anyway. If you're a Buddhist, love you anyway. If you're black, love you anyway. If you're yellow, love you anywhere. If you're pink, love you anyway. So that kind of thing. You know, and then I also posted a picture of George Washington crossing the Delaware, and somebody called me a hypocrite. And he said, "You're a hypocrite. You're sitting there preaching about love, but then you post something about, you know, killing people." I'm like, I was like, you're doing it wrong. I was like, if you are killing somebody or hurting somebody because of an emotion, that's the wrong way. You can love somebody and put a bullet between their eyes at the same time. That has nothing to do with it. I'll give you an example. Let's say we're brothers and you're over at my house, and some reason you get up and you decide that you are going to kill my daughter. And I love you because you're my brother, but you're going to do this. Do you think I would hesitate to put a bullet in your eyes? You know, but I can still love you, but I'm going to end your life. I'm going to stop this from happening. And that's what it is. Violence should not be an emotional action. You know, it should be an action based on a logical situation. I need to stop this from happening. And that's what you have to do to stop. That's the only way to stop it. So that's what I got to do.
Right. Yeah. And that's tough for people to mentally overcome or get around the concept of that, especially if you're, depending on how you're, what your main thought process is. But I 100% believe you or think the same way, and that's why I started carrying myself and, protecting my house and protecting my family, and, not because I hate people and I want to do that, yeah. But, at the same time, I realized that, nature in itself and the world is a chaotic place. And at the end of the day, it's, down to my actions and my, how I handle myself and carry myself that, are gonna, that's who I'm responsible for. I can't rely on someone else to do it for me.
I think General Maddox, I think it was him, but I've also seen it said that, 007 said it, James Bond said it. And I've seen they said Eisenhower said it, and they said Patton said it. I don't know who said it, but it is smart, and I really believe in that. He said, I believe you should be nice to everybody in the room, but also have a plan to kill everybody in the room at the same time. And I firmly believe that, because you never know. I learned the hard way that as a cop, even before I was a cop, and the way I grew up, not necessarily on the right side of society. I've seen the underbelly, and
sure.
They may be your friends, they may be your family, but right now in their emotional state, they're not, and you have no idea what. Most people kill out of emotion. Actually, a lot of people kill. Most offensive killers are killing out of emotion. That's outside of wartime, of course. But that's the reason why they did it. And so when you're thinking emotionally, I mean, you can tell it's an emotional crime when you go to a murder that the person knew them very well, because the body was destroyed. Somebody stabbed them 18 times. Well, they probably knew them then. Because they were emotional, right, and they just started going off. So you do need to prepare. It's not because, I have a lot of people like to say, well, you shouldn't, you carry because you're scared. If you're that scared, you shouldn't even leave the house. I'm like, I'm not scared. They're like, why do you carry a gun? I'm like, because I'm not scared. I carry a gun. I'm prepared. It's like, in your car, you should have a fire extinguisher. Your house has a fire extinguisher, smog, or not smog, but, CO2 monitors, stuff like that. It's not because you think it's going to happen. You think it could happen. And if there's a chance that you could lose your life, then wouldn't it be better to be prepared? So in case that happens, you have the tools to protect your life or somebody else's life.
Right.
And they have found that, that's exactly what happens most of the time. The people that are armed and capable of protecting themselves ends up saving more lives than the people that actually have guns and take them. Most people in every case I've ever seen and worked for in 11 years, the person that, if a person was armed to protect themselves and somebody else has a gun, and the person that protects themselves pulls their gun out, that guy with the gun runs away. I mean, they're scared. They just take off because they don't want to be in that situation. They use the gun to overpower you. I call her my adopted mom. She's the one who took me in when I was homeless, and she works at this gas station in the middle of town. And it's not a big town, but there's probably half a dozen gas stations. Well, during this 1 month, every gas station in town gets robbed by gunpoint, except the one she worked at. And she worked at and every one of them said like no guns, or lots of them said no guns allowed, stuff like that.
Sure.
She had a target behind her where she goes and shoots and, practices. Everybody knew she was armed. They wouldn't mess with her because the chances of getting hurt and the chances of success are low. Criminals are criminals of convenience. They're lazy.
Right.
That's why they're stealing and not working for it. So they're not going to do something they think they're going to get caught, or they think that the high chance of dying. If you have a high chance of dying, or even a lot of them don't even want to use the gun. They're just using the gun to scare you. That's why some of them will use a fake gun, but you don't know if it's fake or not. That's why if somebody has a fake gun and they pull it on you and you end up shooting them, you're not going to get in trouble because they had a fake gun. You can only be judged what you know or what you believe.
Right.
You can't be judged what really is if you don't know what really is. But yeah, I'm a very, very firm believer in carrying. And, I was talking to a guy that was in the military in the 80s, and he was talking to, and he was higher up, he was talking to a general from Russia. Of course, this was years after the Cold War ended. And the general said the exact same thing as the previous general. And once I say, you'll know what I'm talking about. He said a lot of people assume that Russia did not invade the U.S. during the Cold War because of Reagan. Reagan, they were scared that Reagan would actually push the button, would go to war. But that wasn't what kept them from invading. What kept them from invading is that military tactics, to invade a country, they look at the size of your fleet, the size of your military, who has guns, who doesn't, what are your capabilities, and they judge that and base that on what they have. And if they believe that they can overtake you, they will. But with America, he said we couldn't. He said there was no way knowing because there's so many people that are armed in America that there's no way to judge if they're really willing and able, or if they're not going to. He said you just can't. Something like you see on Red Dawn couldn't happen because people. I mean, you do that in Oklahoma, you got a bunch of rednecks playing duck hunt in their front yard. That's why. And that's why, I was talking to a guy in Australia, and he was sitting there trying to judge me because I'm carrying a gun, and he's like, you shouldn't need guns because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, aren't they putting y'all into encampments for COVID right now? And they are, and they're restricted. They're taking little children away from their homes and forcing them to get vaccines. That's not happening here because you will get shot. The Constitution actually protects us. And I've said this as, knowing as a cop, what I was trained was that if I am violating your Fourth Amendment rights by trying to seize you and I have no probable cause to do so, you have the right to fight me. You will not get in trouble for stopping me from trying to kidnap you, because that's what it is. It's kidnapping, government kidnapping.
Sure.
You can't arrest somebody without probable cause. That's why you'll see that drug house next door, and you're like, why don't they ever go in there and arrest them? Well, we haven't been able to get probable cause. We haven't had enough people that would actually snitch. We haven't caught anybody there. And so, it's not as easy as it sounds. And if we do make it easy, then you end up with stuff like the Patriot Act, where they use 9/11 to take people's constitutional rights away by saying, if you're accused of a terroristic act or an insurrection act or anything like that, we don't have to follow the Constitution. That we can actually, and that's why January 6th is called an insurrection, is because they know that if they call it that, then they can hold these people indefinitely without charging them with anything. And people don't understand that. That's the only reason they keep pushing it, because if they stop and say it wasn't an insurrection, now they're in trouble for violating these people's constitutional rights.
Right.
Which, to be honest, if you understand the Bill of Rights, you know that the Bill of Rights has nothing to do with the fact that you're an American. It's inalienable rights. Inalienable means that if you're a believer, it means God-given. If you're not, then it just means the fact that you're alive and you're breathing means that you were born with these rights. You were born the right to speak and believe and pray the way you want to. You have the right to protect yourself. So even if you're an illegal immigrant, you have the right to protect yourself. You can't just let people, so I couldn't get you for having a gun legally. They will. But, that's why I say states that require a gun license to carry, they're violating your constitutional rights. But now 25 out of 50 states are constitutional carry states now. So
right. So it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Everybody started. They did the opposite. Happened. What they thought was happening by making these red flag laws was that they were going to start taking guns away and stuff. But what had actually happened was get the conservative in its the ideology is they conserve. They don't react right away. And so they did that, and they're like, okay, fine, here's some laws. And now New York, even Supreme Court justice passed a law stating that you couldn't just take somebody's guns away. And because the Supreme Court justice there said that, now other states that have red flag laws, it's going to go away. There's a law that's I want to say it's in Washington that came up that said that they passed a law. It was in this last election cycle. It stated that you had to what was it? You had to get a license to even purchase a gun.
Right.
Which is way off the reservation, to be politically incorrect. But I'm in native country, and I am part native, so I can say that, by the way, so don't get triggered. But it's just ridiculous that people's rights get taken away and people allow it to happen. And then people will say, like we were talking earlier about the media, they'll say, oh, because they allowed it to happen, that means it's okay. No, it doesn't. It just means they didn't speak up.
Right.
But when you finally get people speaking up, and then people say, hey, this wasn't right. I'm like, we haven't had, I would say ever since probably Taylor, President Taylor, since we had the last actual constitutional president, they actually followed the Constitution verbatim. He was part of the Whig Party, which actually was the beginning of the Republican Party, and he got kicked out of the Whig Party because he wouldn't do stuff they wanted to do because he said it wasn't constitutional. He stuck with the Constitution. That's a rare thing. You have every president has done something that wasn't constitutional. An executive order, that in of itself is unconstitutional.
Right.
I mean, it's like you shouldn't be able to say this. The president's job is mainly veto powers. He doesn't write bills. So if you're doing executive orders, that means you're basically writing a bill, but nobody's allowed to do anything with it. Or they're not allowed to fight it or argue. Unless somebody finally gets the Supreme Court to look at it, and then Supreme Court justice. You always have at least a couple of Supreme Court justices that are nothing but activists. That they don't care about the Constitution. They just do whatever their political party they got them into the Supreme Court tells them to do.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway,
now it's all driven by puppets.
Yeah. Once you start getting close to politics, you realize how complicated it is.
Yeah, very much so.
And I envy. I have friends that don't know anything about politics, and I think that's great. I mean, if you're not going to vote, but if you're going to vote, research. Don't just look at the person with the most money that raises the most money, that has the most advertisements.
Right. And also pay attention to what those advertisements are saying. Like, I've made a point in the last couple elections in which I've voted that just off basis alone on a character thing, again, leading with love, and not spewing hate. I've made it a point to, like, you're already on a bad, essentially off my list of people I would vote for if I see a smear campaign.
Yeah.
I've had the conversation so many times of, like, that's exactly the main reason why Donald Trump got elected president in the first place. I don't care what your feelings are about him, but the guy knows how to manipulate media, and he made it so whether you loved him or hated him, he was on the forefront of everyone's minds all the time.
Yeah.
And even to the point of he played the Democrats, and he said, and he had every single ad was about beating Donald Trump. But what they didn't realize at the time was you're still putting him in front of people. So by just even though you're slamming him, saying he's evil and, you know, is going to ruin our country, like, you're still putting him on a pedestal in front of people, presenting this person. Yeah. So he's on the forefront of everyone's mind, and that's why he got elected. Like, if you do that, if you can't, understand how that works, it's just going to end up biting you in the ass.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I don't know if you've ever been to any of his rallies or anything, or watched any of his meetings, which a lot of his meetings were on camera. And sure. I'm not talking about like press meetings. I'm talking about like meetings with other people on a round table or something. I've had the pleasure of actually attending a couple of rallies, and hearing him speak, and then I hear him speak at the media. And then I've also saw him in meetings that were videotaped, which, again, most of them were. Do they use the word videotape anymore? Sorry. Video.
It means the same thing.
Okay. But he's different. He uses that tool for its purpose. For when he was at a rally, the whole thing was just to rally the troops, to get everybody excited about what he's saying. To be a comedian, he's actually pretty funny. I mean, he'd do stuff that was just hilarious.
Right.
It was a show. He was putting on a show. When he was in front of the media, that he was going fishing. That's all he was doing. He was just saying things that would get you to start thinking about something. You would ask about this, and he'd start talking about this. He wanted this to be on your mind, so that's what he talked about. He didn't care what you had to say. And then when he got into closed meetings, that's when I gained respect for him, because he's in these meetings, and it's not just Republicans, it's not just Democrats, it's all kinds of people, and they have these problems. And somebody would speak up, and I heard this one guy, he was a Democrat, and he'd say what his problem is. And President Trump would look at him, and he'd turn to somebody who has control over what he's talking about. Not like controlling his speech, but I'm saying the subject that he's talking about, he has something to do with it. And Trump will look at him and say, hey, can you do this, this, and this? And the guy will say, yeah. He said, all right, let's get it done now. And that's how it worked. It was just simply, let's find out the problem, find a solution, or find who can fix it, and fix it. Don't just sit there and talk. He was good about cutting red tape. If it didn't make sense.
Right.
Now, does he fall in line and do stupid stuff? And did he have tweets and stuff that were stupid? Yeah, but his Twitter account was what kept him alive, because people love to watch him. People love to hate the orange man, but people still voted him because it made a lot of people love him even more. And that's why he does have a strong following. But a lot of people, like the MAGA movement, to be honest, is not a Trump thing anymore. I mean, there's people that MAGA that aren't really Trump fans that would vote for DeSantis if DeSantis ran.
Right.
But it's I would say it's the modern Patriot Party, that just cares about things getting done, getting the swamp clean. Because 90% of politicians are the swamp. That's left and right. Look at McCarthy. It's funny. The left will gripe will praise it taking 6 weeks to elect a president, but it takes 4 days to elect a speaker, and they're making fun of the Republicans. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. I'm actually glad it took that long, because they didn't just vote him in, and then they didn't just vote somebody else in. They negotiated powers and stuff that would have never happened if they just let him in. Because I'm sorry, if everybody if all Democrats agree, that means they're being ruled by somebody. Somebody's controlling. If all Republicans agree, somebody's controlling them. You have all different types of people. You can be a Republican and still disagree a lot of what somebody else believes in your party.
Sure.
It's just you're both conservatives. You both believe in these the idea of conservatism. It doesn't mean that you agree with the same way you're conservatives.
Right.
Just like
that kind of brings. Right. Well, that kind of brings it back full circle back to what we were talking about before, where, you might call yourself or, consider majoritively that you're Republican or Democrat or whatever you want to label it. But when you actually talk about it and get down to the nitty gritty, like most people are going to be in the middle of the road. Certain topics, they're going to be more Republican and right leaning, and other topics, they're going to be left leaning. And that's where most of the population is going to live.
Yeah, I agree. It's not that people are pendulums and keep swinging left or right. It's that the loudest voices keep swinging from left or right. And oh gosh, I had something to say and I forgot. Go ahead. I'll remember.
Well, I don't know where to.
Yeah, I literally had something that was pretty pertinent, but it just left me. No, they getting back out. It's the most people. Most people are more close to the center, and they're not. That's why I don't like to say I'm a Republican, because I'm not.
Sure.
I'm a registered Republican, but only for voters' sake. Just because I have to. Otherwise, I'm actually pretty independent. I'm a conservative, but I don't care if you're gay and you get married. I don't care, because
right.
I don't look at marriage through the government as a religious ceremony.
Sure.
Now you yourself getting married in a church, maybe that's hypocritical. And if that was the thing, I'd probably be against it if I was in the church. But to me, marriage is it's really a governmental thing about taxes and finances and property. Let's say that you're gay. I'm not saying you are. I mean, you could be. I'm not judging. But you are the breadwinner, and you're with this guy for 50 years, and he's just a stay-at-home guy, wife, husband, I don't know. But, he just stays at home and takes care of the house and everything. Not that they don't do anything, but that's what he does. He does that
right.
for you, and it helps you out tremendously. I know I have a stay-at-home mom. That's my wife, not my mom. That'd be weird. That's why she's dead. It's really weird. She could be here, though. But you die. And this guy who's been with you for 50 years has no training, no skills outside the house, and
right.
now has no rights to anything that you own, unless you were good enough to put it in a will. But then, even wills can be fought, and so and then it's trapped in court forever. But if you were married, then the spouse would have rights to everything. It all
right.
just goes to you, and it's just easy as that. Even if you didn't write a will, the way the law works,
right.
it goes to the spouse. But that's not the case in gay marriage. And so, I think that's wrong. I don't have to agree or disagree. It's not about that. I have no opinion, because it's not my problem. I don't care what you do with your junk, to be honest. I just don't. Never really thought about it, to be honest. Why would I think about what somebody else does in bed with somebody else?
Right.
It's just, now if you start involving children, I have big problems with that. But,
right.
So, that to me, people are like, well, that's a hypocritical thing to say, I'm like, no, because I'm not making a moral decision. I'm not deciding morally what they're doing or not doing. It's not my business. In fact, it's not supposed to be our business. We're all, if you're wanting to get Christian again, and I know more about Christian, I have studied Buddhism, I've studied Taoism and stuff like that. But if you want to get Christian, we're not supposed to be judging other people's sin. It's not our business. It actually says in the Bible, to seek out thine own salvation. It says, not to judge the splinter in a man's eye when you have a plank in your own. I mean, there's a lot that it says. People will still find reasons to say that they can judge. I know I deal with that a lot. I've gotten into these arguments. I said one time, it's okay to be friends with somebody of a different religious perspective. And if you're a Christian, Jesus was known for it. Man, I pissed off some people. They got mad. These Pharisaical Christians were like, no, that's not even true. Jesus wasn't friends with them. He was just trying to get them to become followers. I'm like, oh, so you're saying Jesus was a manipulator. He was just around trying to manipulate them and convert them. I'm like, that doesn't seem right. I didn't read that in the Bible. Did you read that in the Bible when you were a kid? That Jesus was friends with these guys until he could get them to follow him. And then in fact, it doesn't even say any of them followed him.
Right.
It doesn't. It says for certain people that were, were lost ended up following him. But most of the time, it didn't say anything about the people that he healed. Doesn't say anything about them following him. He also didn't ask about their denomination, didn't about their religious beliefs, didn't ask about where they were from, what their race was, if they would listen to him. Nothing. He didn't preach at them or anything. He just helped them. He just loved them, because true love is not expecting anything from them to love them, and I've said it before, said it several times, and I say it a lot because I say things a lot. But love is sacrifice. If you want to know the true definition of love, it's easy, because if you grew up without love, you understand love very well, because you pay attention to it and you realize that people that love somebody, they love them to a sacrificial point. Well, I love you until I have to sacrifice this. Then that's where I draw the line. I can't love you anymore like that. But then there's some people like, I love them so much, I'll allow them to cheat on me because I love them that much. And so they're able to sacrifice their own happiness because of that. And, when you love a stranger, you're not, if you have to start preaching at them and stuff, you're not sacrificing anything. You are selling something. You're trying to convert them. So you're trying to gain something from them. But if you're just trying to get them healthy, get them fed, get them warmed with no want whatsoever, you're actually sacrificing. Make sense?
Right. 100%. I've kind of followed that sentiment and had that conversation a few times with different people and in various forms. And it's very true, even with relationship advice or what have you, it's, that person is the right one when essentially, you're willing to, sacrifice, essentially all your wants and needs almost to make sure they are happy.
Yeah. I mean, having kids, which should be natural, people should automatically sacrifice for their children. But I grew up that, my parents didn't sacrifice anything. My dad left right after I was born. My mom left me when I was 8.
Sure.
And I don't feel sorry for it. I learned a lot of very valuable lessons that nobody can teach you, that you learn.
Right.
I didn't learn how to guard myself. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was asking me relationship advice, and he doesn't get into serious relationships because he protects me. He doesn't open up. I was like, quit being a pussy. Simple as that. It's like, if the reason why you don't open up is because you're guarding yourself, you're protecting yourself, you're not protecting yourself. I was like, get over it. You're going to get hurt. If you really love somebody, you're going to get hurt. Just assume that it's possible you get hurt. Be strong enough to learn from that hurt. But don't learn to protect yourself more. Learn to see things better. See the signs before it happens. I mean, when let's say you were in a relationship before and you fell so much in love with them, but they ended up cheating on you. Well, don't stop dating people because they might cheat on you. Stuff like that. Start noticing, well, this person was going out partying without me. Well, now just say, hey, I just don't go partying without, I think it's wrong because, it's just we're together. You shouldn't party without each other because things can happen when you get drunk, stuff like that. There's things that you learn. But if you're learning to say, well, I'm just not going to do that anymore because I don't want to get hurt, you're never going to be able to be in love. You're never going to, because people need to see that. And I'm a person, I never opened up, but honestly, I didn't open up because I was scared to get hurt. I didn't know how to. I've never been around people that allowed me to open up, but I told my wife the other day, this gets a little personal, but so be it. Not like anybody's going to see this anyway. But
don't say that.
But I told her, I was like, love to me is sacrifice. It's truly sacrifice. I was like, but at this point in my life, I'm not staying because of how much you love me. It's because of how much I love you,
Sure.
and it's, how much I love my daughter, and I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to but I'll do everything I can to fix the marriage if something's wrong, which nothing is. But, I'm willing to do this, and I want to work on this and stuff. I was like, but you've got to have what's important to you and how much you love the person. And sometimes I can understand why somebody that is in an abusive relationship, I don't agree with them, mind you.
Right.
And I said this when I was in the academy, and the guy who was teaching on domestic assault said, no, they're not that's not true. Because I said that a lot of times women stay with the guy because they're comfortable with it. Well, you think comfort like it's cozy. No, comfort as in normal, like it's what you're used to.
Right.
And so you don't love yourself enough. So therefore, somebody hurting you, you may not even think that you deserve it, but you don't think you don't deserve it.
Sure.
But it also may be you love them so much you allow them to hurt you. You allow them to make these mistakes because it's not about how much they love you. It's about how much you love them. And you've got to be able to love yourself enough to protect yourself from when somebody's hurting you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why it's important to love yourself, love God, love your neighbor.
Absolutely.
And I don't think
I try to work on that every day.
Yeah, I don't think it's a Christian thing. In fact, a lot of things that are Christian values are values for everybody. That's why they were put in the Constitution. It's because it was just normal values. It's just the Christian church wrote them down, and they just said these are our values. But they were just, look at the 10 Commandments. Every bit of the 10 Commandments is common knowledge.
Right.
Don't steal from people. Don't sleep with somebody else's wife. It's just, don't murder somebody. It's just knowledge. It's just everybody. Every law has them laws.
It only circles back once again. We keep going in these circles, but it goes back to talking, to the shirt of "Don't be a dick."
Yeah.
And I said when I pitched the idea to you, like, arguably you could have anything you want saying this is what said it. You have the Bible, the Quran, the Constitution, what have you, anything. You boil it down to what these principles of human behavior are teaching, and it's don't be a dick.
Yeah. I was trying to, a lot of people, and we'd had this conversation before, and I was never good at verbalizing what soldier of God actually meant, because a lot of people take it as in, like, I'm taking up the cross and I'm, it's this Christian aspect of it. And I'm not saying it's not a Christian aspect. That's not what I'm saying, but it, like we said about don't be a dick, it's open to everything. And I'm going to have to read it because I forget the exact words of what I say because I talk a lot. But I wrote it down, and man, I also take a lot of pictures apparently. Well, I download a lot of pictures, but there it downloads. I was talking to people, and they were asking me what soldier of God actually means, and I'm going to ramble until I find it. My God, I post a lot, don't I? How are people even friends with me? If I could post this much on my business page, man. It was I know what it would be. So I sent this thing to somebody. It was simple. I wrote it down and it just came to me, and I don't know. Start talking.
If you can find it.
Yeah. God.
So that's the problem with having someone who, isn't the greatest talker in the world on your podcast and is very comfortable with awkward silences is I don't feel the need to talk. I could just go with that silence.
I had to actually teach myself because, well, getting a podcast was awkward to me because I'm actually really awkward and I don't like talking where I feel like I'm talking to no one. I'm good with conversations. That's why it hit me that because at first I was just going to do monologues and I'm like, I suck at this. But when I have somebody just standing there, you don't have to say a word and I can talk for hours, you know?
Right.
But when nobody's there, it's like, I don't know. Peanut butter's good.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's just, but anyway, I don't know why I didn't think about this because I texted to somebody and I don't really text a lot because you can only do so much in text. It's like Twitter. I talk so much that, I mean, that you have short amount of words that you can put on there and it always stops me. I was like, crap, I can't put that. So, you know,
yeah.
Anyway, I said, you know, soldier of God, I said a soul that isn't a continuous war with evil, not to promote any religion, but to build upon the love that was designed within us. You know, and I think that was, I'll even post that on the screen right here when I edit it because I learned how to do that.
Sure.
I was proud of myself. And I think somebody said, I think you were the one that said, yeah, that's pretty the most basic thing you can do is add a picture to a video. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know that. I thought the most basic thing was just pushing the record button. But it's hard because I've messed up on that a lot. I've recorded and realized it wasn't recording everything or recorded half the sound. Huge learning phrase. But anyway, to me, a soldier of God is not necessarily fighting for a religious purpose. I was watching, and a lot of people worship God, and it's the same person. They just worship him differently. They see him in a different light.
Sure.
But they won't say. I have a friend that's she's Hindu, and she said that Hindus actually believe in one God, one creator, you know, and then there's 2,600 other gods, and people they hear that gods. Remember terminology, you know, 2,600 gods. Well, how many people in the religion in Christian circle have you heard a spirit of alcoholism, a spirit of anger, a spirit of hate? All these different spirits, right? Just place it with the lower G, God. You know,
right?
That it's the same thing. You know, and so you know, a lot of religions are actually very similar. But regardless, our sole purpose, you know, I think is to fight against evil, to stop evil from happening, and to have that love that is within us that creates that higher vibration, you know, and let that resonate. And that should be a very simple thing to understand. But people are so big on their team winning. Everybody wants their team to win.
Right.
And well, I've been a solo player most of my life. I mean, so,
well, it's all the same team.
Yeah. We're just literally fighting on the same field. We just can't get along.
Right.
I agree wholeheartedly. So you work, jumping topic. Where are you working now? Because you just started somewhere, right? You said real estate.
So the company, I'm still in the graphic design field. I'm just working for another company that's in the real estate market, home selling market. Okay. So that's kind of neither here nor there. It's just, you know, under that roof, they're paying my bills and whatnot. But I started up my own company, which you saw the posts about, that I'm trying to get off the ground right now, kind of in a similar fashion as you've done with Soldier of God. And my company is Ninth Paddock Creative.
Okay.
And whereas you use the Bible as a reference tool to be a kickstart to what your company is about, mine uses Jurassic Park as that's kind of the start or the point of my eye opening to creative endeavors, and that got me into being a creative more so than anything before.
Yeah, I know you have a affinity for dinosaurs.
Yes, I do. And that only got cemented when I was 8 years old, seeing Jurassic Park for the first time. Yeah. But it ended up being almost, you could say, a religious experience for me. And even when the newer movies came out, and that's where the name comes from, and just interpreting things and metaphors that they had in the movie, that I think are kind of universal truths and means to kind of, bring on the betterment or help us fight evil or what have you. And that's kind of the route I'm trying to take it is, in the movie, the Jurassic World, Ninth Paddock Paddock 9, as they refer to it, is where they keep the T-Rex from the very first movie. Okay. And they finally release the T-Rex to combat the evil dinosaur and give reinforcement to the good people that are fighting it already. But I interpreted that in so many different ways of, because when they say it in the movie, you don't know what Paddock 9 is. You don't know what's behind there. What are they referring to? So your mind goes crazy, like with anticipation, like, ooh, what are they bringing out? Are they going to reveal a new dinosaur? Or is it going to be something we know of? And, it kind of, to me, is like the opening of the mind, opening your creativity, and being able to communicate creatively through those means. So, once I left the last company that did mostly apparel design, I was like, you know what? I'm going to step away from the t-shirt companies and the kind of the retail business and find something that's a little less
stressful,
chaotic, let's say, a little less chaotic, and a little more stable, where it gives me the freedom to play around in that space of creating and making t-shirts and different apparel items. But I can do it unencumbered and do it for a multitude of different brands and expand myself and do a bunch of different topics, which in the other areas that I was in and companies and positions that I was in previously, I was kind of hindered and, kept in a small box. So this opens it up.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Because forgive me, you'd actually told me at one time when you first got the job that it was a real estate thing, but I just kind of read it in passing. I did think, I was like, well, he's an artist. Artists don't like to be put in, square boxes. But it does because you know what to expect. It's not chaotic. It's the real estate market, the way they advertise is the way they've always advertised, because people don't need the fancy things. They're looking at the house themselves.
Right.
And, and you don't have any, control over that. That's not what you do. You just make these advertisements, do this or do that. But it does give you don't have to go home and try to figure out how to make something work. You can go home and do what you're doing, like, doing that, because it does make sense. And you actually have a leg up on me because you already know the business. I had to learn, and I'm still learning the business. And a lot more about, like, you don't have to hire anybody to draw for you, which would be weird if you did, to be honest. You wouldn't be that good if you had to hire somebody else to do it, unless you were so busy making different things. But I don't think you'll ever do that.
Right.
Because there's only a certain amount of designs that you really need to make throughout the month. And, if you get that swamped, me personally, what I think, when you get that big, it's not that you're going to hire new designers. You'll probably be the person that will hire people to do the infrastructure stuff, not the person doing the drawing and creating the designs, because as an artist, you want to have that freedom of this is what it is. That's why I won't let somebody take over the direction of my company, because for a purpose, I'm not chasing the dollar bill. I'm chasing the message,
Right.
That's just, if the design has to follow the message, it has to look the part. It's got to be, it's got to pretty much be a badass kind of thing. It's got to be,
right.
It's going to be a little rugged, a little rough, but it's going to speak to more people. It's going to draw the people in. And I do like what you did, because I didn't think of Jurassic Park to be that deep of a movie, but now that you say it, I'm like, oh, yeah. I unfortunately, well, you're not going to think unfortunately, but me, I've seen it way too many times because my wife loves Jurassic Park, and and I think she's closer to your age. My wife's 31, and and I'm about to be 43, and so she, when she was at that age. I think she's like 5 years younger than you. I think Jurassic Park came out in like 93 or something.
Yeah, 93.
Yeah, but I don't know how I knew that. I usually don't remember stuff like that. But I was a teenager when it came out, and it was exciting. I mean, and they didn't. It was funny. They didn't use graphics or anything to make the dinosaurs move. They actually used mechanics and stuff. And now, of course, it's not that way at all. It's just crazy how things work. I mean, I don't understand. I still look at computers like magic boxes. I mean, it's just, I don't understand how you get a bunch of zeros and ones together and you can create something like that. I mean, it's just, it's weird. It's not, but yeah, you can, in everything. And that's what I learned actually at car sales, go into what you're doing is where you're turning something like that to put on a message to help, basically to help people, to show some love to people, to get people to think about stuff. I didn't learn about that until I got into car sales. I thought I had to physically be in a position to help people, like as a police officer, and I did that for a while.
Sure.
And I realized that I probably helped more people as a car salesman than I did as a cop.
Right.
Now, at least more directly. Now, as a cop, of course, I kept people from speeding and, causing wrecks and stuff like that. But I never felt like I was actually legitimately reaching out to one soul and making their life better.
Making a difference. And
yeah. I mean, because I think, again, that's why we're here. We're supposed to impact people. We're supposed to love on people, and we're supposed to learn how to be better beings,
Well, be of service.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, last night I saw a really good movie. It's out on streaming services and in the theater right now. It's called The Menu. Highly recommend going and checking it out. I think it's on HBO if you stream it. But kind of the message behind it and the lesson to be taken away is that sentiment of give more than you take.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that and to always fall back on going about things that way and giving and being of service to others, rather than being the one that always is served.
Yeah. Yeah.
So definitely an awesome movie.
I probably would have never watched it until you said this, because I'm that guy that I don't watch a lot of TV, but I like things that are big and loud and, killing people.
Sure. And on its surface, it's a horror movie or a suspense thriller kind of movie. People die and it's violent and shocking in some ways, but it again, kind of to the point of, the metaphors that I saw in Jurassic Park and I like to look for in movies and the lessons they teach. This one basically, by the end of it is slapping you in the face with it. Yeah. And it's a good one that people need to learn.
I think, Well, the CIA definitely can tell you, through Operation Mockingbird that, see how I always throw politics into something in our government. But they are, they learned that, through Operation Mockingbird. They were studying to see if you can control a society, the public, through Hollywood and through the media. And they found out very easily they could do that. And you think they'd quit that, right? Oh, we found out that we can, persuade people to do what we want, but we're not going to do it because that's wrong. I'm like, no, no, they quit the study, but they didn't quit the operation.
The action.
Yeah, the action. But that's true. I mean, Hollywood is like that. That's why you have a lot of wokeism in movies now, which irritates me because I like Marvels. I really do. And I'm not like you. I know you're like a comic book person. I was never really a comic book nerd. I had comic books, but I didn't read them because I don't like reading short sentences. I mean, I'm talking when I was in 6th grade, I read Dean Koontz Lightning, a novel made for, adults and stuff, thick, big words and stuff. I make fun of nerds, but actually I was a nerd. I read the entire Encyclopedia Britannica of 1991. I was that guy. I mean, I just read Moby Dick, everything. I read all this stuff. But comic books, it just wasn't. But when I saw the movies, I'm like, this is cool. But then it just gets so much wokeism. You can't watch anything. It's like, and it makes you believe that, in fact, they've done studies, makes, people believe that, 30-40% of society is gay. And no, it's like 2%, maybe. They actually say people that study, they found the majority of people think the population is mostly 40% black or 40% African American, whatever you want to call it. They found out that's not near the truth. It's like 13%. But all these things, but it's based on what people see in the media and in Hollywood. And Hollywood has a lot of control over people, but people are starting to wake up because they're noticing this and they're not going to these movies. And in fact, saying stupid things like you shouldn't go to this if you're not black because this, it's a black movie. You just literally cut off, the head of Wakanda, stuff like that. Wakanda
Forever. Yeah,
people,
amazing movie though. It was awesome.
And I want to see it, but at the same time, I don't like seeing movies that, and I was nervous because the way people were talking that, and I'm still going to watch it anyway, but I don't like people trying to make me feel guilty for being alive. People assume I'm white. I'm not white. It's funny. People that know me don't assume I'm white. They think I'm Mexican, but
sure.
People that see me on, screen or something, they assume that I'm white or something. I'm like, man, I'm such a mutt. I'm actually everything. I'm included. I am about 75%, close to 75% Scots-Irish.
Sure.
But I have 10% African. I mean, legitimate, like Nigeria, Africa, in my DNA. And we trace my family to it, the Blackcraft, John Blackcraft out of Texas. But that's the thing, but people will still judge you. And because they do that, and people won't do things because they're afraid to get judged, or they'll do things like I have friends that legitimately told me, they're like, man, I feel like I'm becoming racist. I'm becoming a bigot. I'm becoming where I don't like homosexuals and stuff because they're getting attacked by them and saying that you have to do this when they never would have even been in that frame of mind to even think about it. I'm like, I never even think about somebody's race. I recognize race is there, but I don't recognize, I recognize that we're equal. I don't recognize that we're the same as in we're the same color. We're not the same color, but that doesn't matter. We're different. White people aren't the same color. They're different shades. Black people aren't the same color. They're different shades of brown, But when you start getting people to hate each other in the media and the news because they're trying to push an agenda, it actually gets people to hate because they're saying I'm different from you. And instead of focusing on that, look at the kids, look at CRT. We're because of this history, you're such a bad person, but they don't even know their real history. I mean, less than 4% of Americans owned slaves at the height of slavery. less than 4%.
Right.
And if white people didn't fight to free slaves, slaves would have stayed slaves. You know, so
Right.
why hate that? You know, and then you know, it's the Irish were just, there were more Irish slaves than there was anything.
Right.
And they called them indentured servants, but here's the thing people don't know. Most of the indentured servants were actually stolen from the UK as children, sold into indentured servitude to the Americans, and then they indentured servants actually had, there's a law for slavery, there's a law for indentured servitude. Indentured servitude said, you know, you owned them for 7 years, they took 7 years of captivity, and you work for them to pay your debt. And after you pay your debt,
Right.
the person who bought your debt, they have to pay you a living salary. So when you leave, you can actually afford, they're supposed to give you like a horse or a wagon or something, and something so you can start a new life because you've lived under this roof for 7 years. And they didn't want to do that. And so what they did was they worked the crap out of them. Did you know that I want to say it was 46% of all indentured servants' lifespan was only 2 years?
Wow.
Yeah, 2 years, 46%.
I did not know that.
Yeah, but people don't read this history. They don't, because all they say is, oh, this hate. You know, we're supposed to hate. America's so bad. Well, did you know that America was the first country in the world to outlaw the slave trade? Slavery.
Right, yeah.
We stopped being able to buy and sell slaves from ships. You know, like, no, that's outlawed. And yes, it took 80 years from the time we became a country to actually outlaw slavery itself. But how long was slavery around in the UK and Europe or whatever? It wasn't called the United Kingdom back then, but in Europe and stuff, thousands of years. So they were around for thousands of years, you know, but we were around and then finally quit slavery. We were around for 80 and then we quit. You know, that's like saying, well, yeah, this person, it might have took till they were 60, 70 years old before they became rich and became a good person. But this person, he didn't become rich or become a good person until he was 18, and we're going to punish him. What? That doesn't make any sense. You know, but people are, judging others based on a past that none of us had. You know, and
or had any hand in.
Yeah, and in fact, you could argue to say that you don't know if maybe my past, you know, is the part that was very, you know, helped free slaves, and your past could be that your family was never slaves in the first place, because not all blacks were slaves. In fact, the majority of blacks were not slaves at all. But people don't know that because they don't look into history.
Right.
I mean, I have that shirt that you made for me, Pray Like It's 1776. You know what the number one question I get with that shirt is? What happened in 1776? That's actually a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, younger question, right? The first person that asked me was a woman that was probably in her late 50s or early 60s. She asked me what happened in 1776. I'm like, oh my God. And then there's people that people that are a little smarter about the history say, well, shouldn't it be Pray Like It's 1775? I'm like, why? Well, because we became a country in 1776. I'm like, no, we didn't. We declared our independence in 1776. We didn't become a country until like 1783.
Right.
You know, but that wasn't the important. The important part wasn't that we won the war. The important part was that we had the balls to stand up for everybody and say, we're not going to put up with this anymore. That's what we're celebrating. We're celebrating our rebelliousness, that we will not let tyrants tell us what to do, even if we're in the minority, because 3% of colonists were the only people that stood up. 3%.
Right.
Could you imagine? What's 3% of 348 million? You know, it's I'm
horrible at math. That's why I went to art school.
Well, 10% of it is 3.48 million. And so you break it down even more. I mean, you know, that would be like, you know, 1 million people stood up and said, out of all them people, only 1 million stood up and said something. That's a very small amount of people. And yet they did. And these weren't people that had nothing to lose. These were people that had everything to lose. I'm talking super wealthy people I mean, Thomas Jefferson was super wealthy. So was Ben Franklin.
Yeah, he was stupid wealthy.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't have to do anything. I mean, he could have just done what he did and been an aristocrat and just lived under the king's rule. But, as long as he followed the rules, he was fine. Didn't have to lose anything. But these people, they, and now the people that are standing up and fighting are the people that have nothing to lose. And honestly, people with nothing to lose are a lot more dangerous. That's what
very true.
People ask me when, because I get into this conversation when I was a cop, especially because people talk about taking away guns. I'm like, we're not the ones going to take your guns away. We're the ones that are going to protect you because I was a deputy. And they're like, well, what do you think is it going to take to get people to stand up? I said, unfortunately, it's going to be where we don't feel like we have a choice but to stand up. To get out there in the streets and protest because we have no work, we have no jobs, we have no food. You're in camp, you're taking our children away. When it gets to that point is when, and I'm hoping that, politics will actually play out and the pendulum will swing back and we'll say, nope, we're not going to allow this to happen. And it seems that way, that it's going that way, but you never know.
Right. And that comes down to the old saying of, don't poke the bear.
Yeah.
It's like, you could poke it and nothing will happen, but there's going to come a time, don't know when, don't know where, that eventually you're going to poke it and it's going to react.
Yep.
And that's kind of the same thing. And most people they'll go about living their lives, in that kind of comfort zone, like you spoke about before, until they have to change and, they have no other choice. It's do or die, or, they lose something or what have you. But, it comes down to, being left with no other choice. And then they're able to, because they're forced to make that decision, stand up. And I mean, I fell into that trap, and thankfully I was at a workplace that kind of applauded that and heralded that, to where, I got to the point where I was comfortable enough to speak up and stand up for myself and push back. But yeah, I got to a spot where, in a scenario where, I had no other choice but to stand up and be like, no, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, this scenario doesn't work. And, that something needs to change.
Yeah.
And had I not done that, then, I probably wouldn't be where I am today.
I think it's important. It's an important life lesson. I watched a video. It was a short. Well, it wasn't. It was a reel, whatever you call these things. It was on Facebook Reels. But this guy, it was on TikTok. Sorry, TikTok. This guy actually said that he doesn't think we should outlaw bullying. He thinks it's important. And at first you're like, what? No. Bullies suck. And he said, I completely agree that bullies suck. He said, however, if you outlaw bullies and you make it where nobody can be a bully, he said, now physical violence and stuff, he said, that should always be nipped in the bud. He said, but you take away the opportunity for somebody to stand up for themselves. You take away the opportunity where somebody says, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to get up and I'm going to say, no, you're not pushing me around anymore. First time I was bullied that I can have recollection, besides like my mom's stepdad or step-husbands, or sorry, my stepdads, or my mom's boyfriend, taking that out of his side. But the kids, I remember I was living in Arlington, Texas. I was 8 years old. It was the last time I was still living with my mother. It's funny. I lived in the ghetto, but the only two kids that picked on me were not the black kids, because it was the black ghetto. It was the white kids, the two 15-year-olds that hung out together that lived across the road, across the parking lot from me, were always bullying me. I was 8 years old, and I was scrawny. I was small. I was sickly. I mean, I was not as plump and juicy as I am today. But anyway, I finally got tired of it. They were chasing me around the building, and I just stopped. I said, I'm just not doing this anymore, because I was never scared to get hurt. I wasn't. I'd already been fighting grown men by this time. You know, it sounds like fighting like I was winning these fights. I wasn't winning these fights.
No.
You know, but I was standing up for myself. But I allowed that fear of confrontation to get to me because I didn't want to disappoint. And finally, one kid was coming around the corner and he takes off running towards me, and we're like 20 yards away. I just stand there. I just look at him, and he keeps running, He gets right close to me and pop, kicked him right in the nuts. And he falls down on the ground. And then the guy that was coming around, because they were going to circle around and get me, he falls down. This kid, all he sees is this guy on the ground and me just standing over him, like, and just looking at him. He stops and he turns around and he gets out of there. He's like, I'm not putting up with this. I learned, dude, stand up for yourself. From that point on, like a buddy of mine said the other day, he said that he said, I have a punchable face. I'm like, well, that's actually quite true. I understand that. He said, no, you look like somebody that's been in a lot of fights, that's not afraid to go toe-to-toe with somebody. I was like, because I have gone toe-to-toe with a lot of people. I'm not afraid to get into a fight. I don't want to. I try my best. And because I haven't always looked like this. I haven't always been that guy that would stand up and stuff. I always tried to stand up for what I believed in, but I was kind of always skittish, always scared because I didn't want to be judged. Most people don't stand up, not because they're afraid to get hurt. They don't want to get judged. They don't want people to look down on them. You know, that's a common theme. Most people do not want people to look down on them. And I just realized, you know what? People are always going to look down on me. It's just going to happen, you know. But it is important to stand up anyway. I don't care if 100% of Christians watch my content and say that's BS. Or sorry, they wouldn't say that. That's bullheck. Whatever they say. I don't know. But, you know, I don't care if they say that. And I am the only one that says, no, this is what Jesus said. He did not say this. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't care if you worship Jesus or not and believe in that type of Christianity, because honestly, there are actually beliefs in Christianity. Christians will argue this and say, no, that's not it. But yeah, early Christianity especially, they didn't say Jesus was God. I'm not saying he is or isn't. Again, I don't say my beliefs, but understanding that there are people that believe that. And so and why they believe that. That doesn't mean that Jesus as a man was not somebody you shouldn't look up to. You know, and if you introduce Jesus as the man instead of Jesus as the God, people that are non-believers will listen. They normally won't listen, circle back to listening to people. People generally won't listen if they think automatically you're trying to get somebody to believe in this God that was a living God. Well, you remember church growing up. Did Jesus introduce himself as a God? I mean, especially when he first came around, was he saying, hey, I'm God, I'm the Messiah, and you should worship me? The first 2 years of his life, his open life that's in the Bible, he didn't do that at all. He introduced himself as a man, and he acted as a man and said, you can do greater things than I can. He didn't say can. He said, you will do greater things than me.
Sure.
You know, that is a very huge statement, you know, that people don't put very much thought into. But, you know, but anybody, even if you're a non-believer, if you look at what he did about helping people, about loving people regardless, and about standing up. See, that's why I say Jesus is a badass, not because, he flipped tables. That's what a lot of the religious like to tell me, not just the religious, a lot of Christians. The first thing they think is him flipping tables and hand making a whip and whipping people. That's what they think of. That wasn't what I saw. That's not what I thought of. I know what it's like to be intimidated. I know what it's like to have tyrants control you and rule you, and you can't leave your bedroom because you're afraid you're going to get killed. You know, that you're going to get an ass whooping if you say one thing wrong. I know what it's like. But somebody that will look at that tyrant in the eye no matter what and says what is right, regardless what the consequences, we don't do the right thing because of the consequences. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Period. Right. You know, if we had more people like that, type of Jesus, you know, this world would be a much better place because all the bullies would be scared of us. You know, instead we're saying, you shouldn't be a bully. So these people that could grow up to be big and strong and proud and know that they have this power, never get to know this power. All they know is you shouldn't bully people. I feel triggered. don't do that, because you shouldn't say bad things because, you know, that's hate speech. I'm triggered. You're spreading hate. Well, yeah, it's wrong, but hate spreads because people allow it to spread. Not because people say you can't do this. Not let me rephrase that. It's not that they allow it to spread like saying that you're allowed to do this, and so therefore it's allowed to spread. So we're not going to allow you to do it, so it doesn't spread. No, it's because people stand up and smash it. They let them show themselves, and they get rid of it. If you don't allow the tyrants to show themselves, I mean, think of Hitler. If people would have known Hitler was going to do what he did, he would have never rose up in power. You know, he did it in secrecy. You know, that's how everything happens, in secrecy. Tyrants come out of – it's not like they just suddenly appear and that's they've just now became a tyrant. No, they were always tyrants. You just didn't watch them. You didn't allow them to speak or whatnot. Right. But so I think it's very important, and I kind of agreed with the guy. You know, you got to let somebody stand up for themselves. Let them, you know, as being a father, you don't want your kid to get hurt, but you got to let them get hurt.
100%. I mean, I heard that too. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, no, that's bullshit. Yeah. Like you, as someone who was bullied and I'll admit was a bully, like you need those people, because it, like you said, it forces people, it forces others to stand up for themselves, and it forces, you know, you to learn self-reliance. And yeah, some trauma could come from it, and you know, some healing will need to be done later on, but at the same time, it's gonna make you a better person overall, and see where these things come from, and be able to stand up for yourself and hold yourself to that regard, so that you don't get stepped on or pushed around or, you know, bullied later in life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've worked out, you've gone to the gym. Did it hurt? I mean, was it exhausting?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, was it pleasurable? You know, it's only pleasurable once you've been doing it so long that now you're fixed everything, and you're just building on to what you've already created. You know, but it hurt trying to create that first, and we need that pain, the growing pains, because somebody, you know, I was having this conversation with somebody, and I told them, we were talking about the purpose of even being in this plane of existence, this incarnation. Sure. And I said, well, it makes perfect sense to me, because they're like, why wouldn't we just live in heaven? You know, just do that. I was like, well, because you can't grow. You can't grow in heaven. You can't become a better person in heaven. I mean, imagine everything is perfect. Nobody's hating people. People are loving. You know, we're all equal. I mean, we all we know each other's thoughts, everything, you know. How do you become a better person, a better being? How do you become somebody that's a little more enlightened, that you're growing? You can't grow without pain. That's why they call it growing pains. You know, so we come in this incarnation saying, I need to learn these certain skills. I need to learn these, and I'm not talking about skills like welding or something. I'm talking about, you know, how to cope with loss, abandonment issues, how to do this. I need to know what it's this. I need to know what it's like to help somebody, because how can you help anybody while you're in heaven if only people are in heaven? If the only existence is a perfect existence, how can you ever get the pleasure of helping somebody? You know, you don't know what it's like, because nobody needs help. You're just sitting there, you know, playing on a harp. Whatever, you know, it doesn't make sense. But if we have this existence like this, then it makes sense. You know, we get the opportunity to learn these lessons, to struggle, and it's just a blink of the eye of eternity. So when you think, I don't know how God could let this evil exist, well, it's a blink of an eye. I mean, how could it? Would you think of anything like if you knew that you would gain a valuable lesson if you could save somebody? Let's say you knew you could save somebody's life if it was negative 30 degrees outside. If you went outside for a split second and came back inside, would save somebody a lifetime of pain, would that really be pain? I mean, would it hurt you? Would you do it? Yeah, most people would. Everybody would, because it's really nothing. It'd be a split second of pain, and then it's over. You're done. Bam, it's gone.
Right.
You know, and that's the way reality is. It's nothing. I don't care how traumatic the pain is you think it is. It's a blink of the eye compared to eternity. And so we don't think of it as a huge sacrifice to spend 90 years of your life in poverty or in tyranny. The lessons you learn as a soul is impenetrable. You know, it's like nobody can teach them things. Like my childhood, people say I never like to talk about it because people are like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, why? Why are you sorry? You know, and it's not because why are you sorry? It didn't happen to you. Not that. Why are you sorry? You would take them lessons from me. You know, the things I learned, the compassion I gained from all this. I wouldn't.
Right.
You know, I wouldn't change a thing from my childhood at all. And it was not saying it was not pleasant doesn't even give it enough steam for what it was. But but it was worth it to me. Right. Because if one person in social media land hears my story and realizes that you don't have to be a victim, and so they don't have to suffer what I suffered for, not only was it worth it, I'd do it again. And I truly believe that, you know, because our mission on earth is to love and to learn. Ta-da.
Yep. It comes down to that. Yeah.
Well, I've actually kept you on here for quite a bit because we spoke for like half an hour before this, and it's already almost 2.5 hours. So I'll go ahead and
time flies when you're having fun, man.
I know I've actually got to go to my real job, and so I can pay bills. But man, I enjoyed it. I really do. I like talking because I don't get the chance to speak, to be honest. You know, I work by myself. I was always shut down my whole life. You know, people didn't listen to me. They didn't care. You know, nobody asked. When I moved in with my aunt and uncle when I was 10 or 11, they never even asked me about my childhood. Nobody ever asked me what I thought, my opinion. Nobody cared, you know, and I think everybody's voice matters, but I also think everybody should have the opportunity to hear somebody else's voice. You know, you never know what you need. Let me back up. You don't always know what you need until you hear it, you know, or see it. And, you know, and then the lessons that we can learn. I mean, like me, hell, just talking to you, I never even thought about looking for lessons in movies that weren't obvious about it being for a lesson. Because I love inspirational movies. I mean, you know, them type of movies. I don't like drama, like, you know, teenage drama or people just like, oh, he cheated on me. I don't care. Get over it. You know, I gave advice to somebody the other day, which was totally Christian of me, was they're talking about breaking up with this serious relationship. I was like, well, the best way to get over somebody is to get under somebody, which works, by the way, if you ever want to know. I don't advise doing it, though, because you need to have morals and values, and I do think you need that, but it does help.
Sure.
But, you know, I enjoy the ability to actually have a conversation, and somebody that, like, talking to you, I mean, like I said, for the first year, I had no idea what you actually mean, if you even agreed with anything I said, you know, because that's the key to listening, is that you don't have anything even on your face that is saying you disagree with them, because a lot of people, when they see that you disagree, they will pull back.
They recoil and
so you're not getting the opportunity to hear them. Don't have a face. Don't have an opinion. Just hear them out. See what they say, you know. And you'll be surprised. You could learn something. You probably will learn something if you allow yourself to. And I think that, in a nutshell, everything in life, every single thing in life has a lesson that you can learn from. You just got to be willing to listen to it. Thank you for sticking around till the end. Hopefully, I left you either enlightened, lightened, or moved by the experience. If you enjoyed what you saw, could you hit that like and subscribe button right there? And if you didn't, could you still hit that like and subscribe button right there so somebody else has the opportunity to not like what they saw? Thank you.